Shalom, giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachahakwarash. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations as always to the elect. And this is going to be another episode of how the image of the beast both speaks and lives in this modern day. As we know, the beast, all right, is the ancient Roman Empire, all right, which had a wound, all right, and the deadly wound was healed, starting at the Renaissance. The Renaissance period, brought back, the image of the Western Roman Empire that fell, that was ran by the Edomites. And we know for a period of 1,000 years, Rome, all right, along with Esau, Edom, the Western Roman Empire was done. And the Renaissance period around the late 13, early 1400s brought about, the healing of that wound. So from the Renaissance period, which started in Italy, all the way, through, the Spanish, the French, the British, and all the way to America, which is Babylon the Great, along with the NATO and the EU, the ancient Roman Empire, all right, is speaking and living in this current time. Right before our very eyes, we have a Senate, Colosseums and various, holidays that, are practiced in this current time. They all go back to ancient Rome, Roman numerals, Romance. All right, we're living in the modern day Roman Empire, all right, via this system, this beast system. This is the revival of the beast, okay? America is the Roman Empire, all right, all over again. And that's how the image of that beast speaks and lives. And we always go into that. So in this episode, I want to go into the history of social media, as I was sent an article, which we'll go into that article. Let me see if I can bring that up real quick. All right, Ciceros Web, how social media was born in ancient Rome. And we know social media is a big part of how this empire runs, big part of this age, all right? And in our minds, that's something new and modern, but what does the scripture say? As we'll get, there's nothing new under the sun. So we'll tap into a little bit of this article, and I'll leave it in the description, Lord willing. But I wanted to get this video here. Ciceros Tweets, the history of social media, with Tom Standage, off of this Space Junk podcast. I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit of it, and we'll get a few scriptures and close it out. All right. But, even something as small as fast food, goes back to Rome. Okay. Rome is where the mindset behind fast food started. Okay. And I believe I did a video on that before. But now we have the history of social media. All right. And Cicero was at the forefront of it. So let's listen.
And everything dropped off a cliff after 2008, but particularly media, it just never picked up again in terms of that advertising revenue. But then, as I prepared for this interview with you, I started to look at your work around drawing allusions and allegories between historical incidents and more contemporary incidents. And I thought, oh my God, I've been looking at this from a decade perspective. And really, I ought to be looking at this from a millennia perspective, because you've written a fabulous book, which I really, really like. And I often have to say I like things for the purposes of interviews, but I genuinely like this book and the way it's written, which is called The Writing on the Wall. And it's basically about how ancient Rome did social media, or something very similar, long before we did social media. So it's saying, hang on, we think we're really clever. We've got all of this Twitter stuff going on, but the ancient Romans were doing all of this stuff before. And this appeals to me for several reasons. One, because I'm a historian of science, and so I find all of this really interesting. Two, because it's always nice to know that you're not that special. And three, because as an uber nerd, I studied Latin to the highest level you could in high school. and I studied the work of Cicero, which you focus in on, and I just thought that it was just the most inspired idea. And I know you say that you keep doing the same trick. It's a good trick.
I'm glad you like it.
So I wanted to read out a little section from the beginning of the book, and then I'm going to throw to you and basically say, talk about that.
Okay.
So prepare yourself. So you write, to modern eyes, this all seems strangely familiar. Cicero was, to use today's internet jargon, participating in a social media system. That is, an environment in which information was passed from one person to another along social connections to create a distributed discussion or community. The Romans did it with papyrus rolls and messengers. Today, hundreds of millions of people do the same things rather more quickly and easily using Facebook, Twitter, blogs, and other internet tools. The technologies involved are very different, but these two forms of social media, separated by 2 millennia, share many of the same underlying structures and dynamics. They are two-way, conversational environments in which information passes horizontally from one person to another along social networks, rather than being delivered vertically from an impersonal central source. I'm throwing to you to comment.
Yeah. So yes, it's my old joke again, which is that I only have one joke, but I like to think I tell it well. Yes, that social media is much older than we think it is, and in fact, if you look at the long history of media, and I start in the Roman period just because that's the first time you've got a kind of reasonable level of literacy in the general population, possibly as high as a third. If you look at the past 2,000 years of media, the shape of it is very different. It is that media is social for most of that period. And then there's this anomaly between about 1830 and 2000, where mass media in the form of newspapers and radio and TV becomes the dominant form of media. And what's happened in the past 20 years is the reassertion of social media. And to people, like us who've, only been alive for the past 50 years or so, we didn't experience the original era of social media. So social media looks like it's new and it's just sort of popped up out of nowhere. But actually, if you look at the long history of media, and the subtitle of that book is Social Media, the First 2,000 Years. If you look at the long history of media, you see that the anomaly is in fact the mass media era. And the mass media era occurs because mass media technologies that allow somebody to reach a large audience are initially very inefficient. And so you can't all have a printing press, you can't all have a newspaper, you can't all have a radio station. So you end up with this consolidation of a few, newspaper owners own the newspapers, and there are a few radio stations. Initially, they're only state radio stations, and then you get kind of a handful of, in America, you get sort of a handful of big commercial networks. And it's basically a bandwidth scarcity problem. You can't all have a radio station because there isn't enough bandwidth, because the way radio used to work was you had to have a chunk of dedicated bandwidth. And then the internet blows all of that up and says, actually, you can all have a radio station or a podcast or a TV show or whatever the hell you want to have. And so that takes away that scarcity, and it takes us back to a world that looks a lot more like what things looked like before the rise of mass media in the 1830s or so. And so if you go and look at those pre-industrial social media systems, like early newspapers, early newspapers were basically community platforms. You would put an advert in the newspaper saying,
in the 1800s, was dealing primarily with the British, which the British is another form of a revival of Rome, all right, because America came out of the British, okay? So let's keep going.
I lost my horse yesterday, and it looks like this. Has anyone seen it? If you just go and look at early newspapers, this is what they're full of, this kind of gossip. And it's and then letters where we've heard this, or someone's written a letter to the paper, or we've heard this from the next town's newspaper, so we're reprinting this letter that they've got, and it's all being kind of passed around. And then before that, you get social media in these lots of other environments, in coffee houses, with pamphlets. The scientific revolution and the kind of the idea of scientific journals comes from the fact that Oldenburg and others are trying to figure out a way to basically connect all of Europe's scientists in one giant coffee house, and they figure out the way to do it is to kind of summarize the things they've been talking about in a journal, and then send that journal around. And then I kind of go back further, the kind of you get social poetry in the Tudor court, which is quite interesting, the sort of Facebook of the Tudor court. And then yes, probably my favorite example, I originally wanted to call the book Ciceros Web, and in Italian the book is called I Tweets di Cicerone, I think, which is Cicero's Tweets. Although, of course, Cicero would have pronounced his name Cicero, because all C's in Latin were hard. Right. And in fact, if you look at the way he writes his name in Greek, he uses the letter kappa. But anyway, so yes, the Cicero example is lovely. You get social media in the Roman period first because you've got enough literacy, and you've also got the other thing you need for a social media system is cheap transmission from one person to another. Today we have broadband. The Romans had slaves, so they had scribes and they had messengers, and noblemen not really a nobleman, wealthy Romans like Cicero would have had a staff of people who would copy books for them and deliver messages for them. And the way books were actually, I have a section in the book on how book publishing worked, but books were originally a social medium, and they relied on person-to-person copying. And today we would look at that and go, that's piracy. But of course they had no concept of that at the time. So if you wrote a book, so I would write a book and I would dedicate it to my Roman patron, who would have in fact paid me to, he'd give me enough money to live on while I wrote the book. And I would then give, the first proper copy of the book, beautifully written out and on scrolls, to that nobleman, and it would go in his library. And the hope would be that other, that visiting scholars and philosophers would go to his library and they'd say, oh, here you've got the new Thomas Standages, and they'd get it out and read it. They go, this is great, I've got to have a copy of this. And he'd go, leave it to me, I'll send you a copy. He would then get his scribes to make a copy of that whole book and then send it over to them, and then they would put it in their library, and then people would visit their libraries and go, oh, I see you've got this. And then if a book was really successful, you could tell, because if you went down to the bookshops, and there was a row in Rome where there was a particular place where the bookshops were, if you went into the bookshops and they had your book, that meant that enough people were asking for it that they had bothered to get some copies made of it, and that was a great sign of success. And as an author, you would be thrilled that there were pirate copies as we would now see them. But this is very much a sort of post industrial media way of looking at the world. You actually wanted your books to be passed around as much as possible. And in fact, Galen, the great Roman physician, he's doctor in chief to the emperor Marcus Aurelius, and he's in another one of my books as well, because at one point he conducts the greatest wine tasting in history. The Romans often used wine as a medium for drugs, and so Galen, and the principle was the better the wine, the better the medicine. So Galen,
And wine tasting is something that is big here in this world, in this empire. Okay, we'll listen to a little bit more, get a few scriptures, look at that article. I don't want to take too much time on it, but I just thought this was interesting, how that, the Lord is allowing all of this information to come out. We're literally in Rome all over again, in many ways, than just the Colosseum, shopping malls, fast food, the Senate, the way the government is ran, the military might, and all of that. Everything is so much more. Olympics, that whole Greco-Roman beast system is literally back here today. But as the scriptures say, the dragon, which is the Roman Empire, gave them their seat and authority. Okay, that's what gave this beast system its power. Okay, and that power is being used today to run this current world. All right.
Goes, okay, takes it upon himself to go into the imperial wine cellars and find the best wine in the world. And he's like, he's working for the most powerful man in the world, the Emperor of Rome, at its absolute height. Anyway, so he goes and does this big vertical tasting and decides that a particular vintage of Falernian is the best wine to make medicine out of. But anyway, Galen had this problem that people were taking down notes in his lectures and then passing them off as books. And another thing you could do is if you had a medical book that no one was buying, you would just change the title so that it said it was by Galen, and then people would buy it. So Galen was so annoyed about this that he would go to bookshops and he would go to the Galen section and see what they had, and then he'd say, I never wrote this, or this is somebody taking notes in my lecture and they've got all of these things wrong. So Galen actually wrote a book, and it's one of the books that survives of Galen's, and it's, I think, but anyway, he wrote this book which was basically a list of all the books that he'd written, so you could tell which ones weren't by him. So it was like a list of the genuine works by Galen. These analogies, I think, they reveal both the similarities between those different media systems, but also it's another way of us looking at our own systems. It makes us realize that the idea of copyright and the idea of piracy, and in fact, in video games, there's what used to be called the Chinese model, which is a model where you give the game away and then you charge for the in-game add-ons. This is now a very, very popular model. But one of the reasons it emerged was that in China, it was a response to massive.
All right, and you can keep watching this video. I mean, he goes into some more stuff. But here's the article. Okay, Ciceros Web, how social media was born in ancient Rome. We've already seen that modern social media came from a long lineage of primitive predecessors from the Floreglia of the Middle Ages, or the whatever, which predated Tumblr by half of a millennium, all right, to Voltaire's Republic of Letters, the Facebook of its day, okay, to Edison's clear early viral cat videos, to Felix Finian's analog Twitter of early 20th century France, which France, all right, was also, that's one of the seven heads, okay? The Spanish, the French, and the British, all right, in America was born, 13 colonies was born out of the British. So all of these empires, held to this, and I'm gonna look up some of these other little um, happenings they're naming, but it says, but it turns out that social media originated even earlier than that in ancient Rome. All right. And the writing on the wall, social media, the first 2,000 years, public library. All right. History whisperer Tom Standage takes us, and that's that guy in that video, takes us to task with debunking our, all right, presentism bias by tracing the surprising. And see, people think, that, somehow America, that all of these concepts that run this modern world are something new. All right. But pretty much, all they have is just more technology. This is a highly technological Rome. Okay. And by tracing the surprising, all right, history of what we know as social media today. And it turns out we owe it all to a famed Roman statesman, Cicero. Okay. In 51 BC, the Roman Republic passed a new anti-corruption law requiring high-ranking government officials to take up posts in provinces. Cicero himself, much to his dismay, was appointed regional governor, all right, of Cilicia, a province in present-day Turkey, inconveniently far from Rome's hotbed of political activity. Anxious about falling behind on critical knowledge about the power dynamics of Rome, Cicero had only one hope: the sophisticated information exchange network the Roman elite had developed. Okay? Stanges explains at a time where there were no printing presses and no paper, instead, information circulated through the exchange of letters and other documents which were copied, commented on, all right, and shared with others in the form of papyrus rolls. Cicero's own correspondence of one of the best preserved collections of letters from the period shows that he exchanged letters constantly with his friends elsewhere. Today you have text messages, posts, tweets, Instagram, and all of these various different things. All right, where people are able to keep up with information. Okay, but back then they did it, all right, via letters and so forth. Passing them on. It says keeping them to date. Let's see here. Shows that he exchanged letters constantly with his friends elsewhere, keeping them to date with his latest political. All right. My mind ain't working this time. I'm just late. Um, Whatever. Passing on items of interest from others and providing his own commentary and opinions. Letters were often copied, all right, shared and quoted on letters. All right, in other letters, some letters were addressed to several people that were written to be read aloud or to be posted in general, all right, composition. All right. When Cicero or another politician made a noteworthy speech, he contributed, he could distribute it by making copies available to his close associates who would read it and pass it on to others. Many more people might then read the speech than had heard it being delivered. All right. Just like today, if Joe Biden does a speech, okay, that speech can be shared on social media. Okay. And more people see the speech via the share than the people who were actually there. Okay. It says many more people might then read the speech, all right, than had heard it being delivered. Books circulated in a similar way. All right, as sets of papyrus rolls passed from person to person. Anyone who wished to retain a copy of a speech book would have it transcribed by scribes before passing it on. Copies also circulated, all right, of the Acta Diurna, the Daily Act, or State Gazette, just like you have the Daily News today, all right, or the Daily, newspaper. Well, now you have, social media, okay, and different, pages post particular news. All right, then you share that news. The original, which was posted on a board in the forum in Rome each day, and contains summaries of political debates, proposals for new laws, all right, announcement of births, deaths, all right, the dates of public holidays and other, all right, official information as he departed for Cilicia. Cicero asked his friends and protege Marcus, all right, Rufus, to send him copies of each day's Gazette along with his letters so that he can keep up with what's going on in Rome. All right. This would be just a part of Cicero's information supply. Others will write, many will bring me news. All right. Much too will reach me, even in the way of rumor. And we have that same system today via social media. All right. And tweets and just various information, man. Okay, social media is the Twitter, all right, which I've never been on there, but from what I hear and see, it's the number one way for information to spread. All right, and that started with a guy like that started in Rome. All right, and I'll put this, you know, um, this was the dawn of social media as we know it. All right, today, even though it wasn't called that or called anything at all. Okay, so boom, there you go. It's a lot more in this article, but I'll just get a scripture. This is the book of Ecclesiastes 1 and 9. The thing, all right, that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. All right, is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It had already been done already of old time, which was before us. Okay, now there's an individual who keeps posting on the comment board. All right, well, the mark of the beast, all right, is nothing new. Well, the system of tattooing and tagging and marking and branding your slave is nothing new, but it going inside of you is new. Okay, that's never been. All right, an actual device to track you under your skin is new, but the concept of branding and marking your slave is not new. That actually goes back to Egypt, okay, and Rome, and the Greeks and the Romans picked up on that system of branding and marking your slaves and subjects, okay, or that being a way of them paying homage or submitting to a god. All right, today's version of that will be the charagma, which is John the Revelator described that in Revelation, the 13th chapter. So the system of, branding or marking a slave is not new. All right. But what John the Revelator saw was a modern digitized version of, all right, that system. All right. The charagma. All right. Which stigma is the Latin way of saying tattoo. All right. And stigma is pretty much a branding or a mark you would put on your body in dedication to another god. So there's nothing new. The Colosseum we see, the Senate, there's nothing new. Okay. Many things that we see in our everyday life, the days of the week, all right, are named after Roman gods. The days of the month are named after, those Roman gods. So we're literally in Rome. Okay. There is, let's read this in the NLT. History merely repeats itself. Ecclesiastes 1 and 9. It has already been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. Sometimes people say, here is something new, but actually it is old. Nothing is never truly new. Okay. And when we get Revelation, the 13th chapter, okay, Revelation, the 13th chapter and the 12th verse, and he exercised all the power of the first beast before him. And the first beast before him is the ancient Roman Empire. And this is speaking of Babylon the Great, the revival of Rome. And he caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And that's the ancient Roman Empire, in particular the ancient Western Roman Empire, okay, which was known as the pagan Roman Empire. All right, but the deadly wound was healed via the Renaissance, which we always go into. Renaissance means rebirth. Okay, and if you go into what the Renaissance brought back, it brought back pretty much the philosophies, ways, thinking, the healing practices of the ancient Western Roman Empire. Okay, so let's just jump to verse 15. And he had power to give life to the image of the beast. Okay, he had power to give life. Okay, life. All right, life is pneuma, like pneumonia, third person. All right, I'll go here. Sometimes referred to in a way which emphasizes his personality. So the personality of ancient Rome is living through America. Okay, the America comes in the spirit of ancient Rome. America also comes in the spirit of ancient Sodom, ancient Egypt. Okay, it's the mother of all harlots, sometimes referred to in a way which emphasizes to his work, power, spirit. Okay, to give life. Okay, this system gave life to ancient Rome. Okay, and the image, okay, is icon. Okay, likeness, image, figure. All right, moral likeness. Okay, the image of one, and one in whom the likeness of anyone is seen. So we're seeing the likeness of the ancient Roman Empire via, all right, to be like. Wow, to be like. Okay, so the image of ancient Rome is back here today, living through America. Okay, and he had power to give life into the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image should be killed. Now, word kill can also mean separate, meaning you will be separated from the company of this system if you're not down with the ideologies, the ways, and everything else. And eventually, you can be physically put to death. Okay, should both speak, to utter a voice, to emit a sound, to speak, to use the tongue. Okay, to talk, to utter. And ancient Rome is being uttered through the energy being pushed forth by Babylon the Great. Okay? So this is clear as day. And to add social media in there, fast food, we all, we go into how, ancient Rome. All right, let's just type that in, fast food. One second. Boom. Fast food joints existed in ancient Rome. Okay, see that? And it was called the third, or this is the name of it. I can't pronounce it. Whew. The thermopolium, the fast food of ancient Rome. The thermopolium was the place of refreshment in ancient Rome, a sort of snack bar where drinks and hot food were served at that time. In fact, like today, it was not unusual to have lunch outside of the house. The name has a Greek origin because, again, it's the Greco-Roman Empire, but Rome gave them the majority of their power. All right, means hot shop or hot things. Since the term appears very rarely, in fact, the word yada yada yada. You can look this up. I'm not about to get all into it because I've done lessons on it before, but this is very intriguing. Again, there's nothing new under the sun, as it says in the book of Ecclesiastes 1. We'll see if we can get a quick precept off of that. Oh boy, give me 1 second here. Yep, Ecclesiastes 1 and 9. See what the precept says. Ecclesiastes 3:15. That thing which has been is now, and that which has already been, and God required that which is past. Yeah. That's pretty much it. So yeah. All right. I just wanted to tap into that, and hopefully you brothers and sisters will edify, man. On to the next. Shalom.